Welcome back to A-Wrap. Today's update focuses on a significant shift in the ongoing political conversation surrounding the potential release of the Epstein files. As Tuesday's vote approached, it became increasingly clear that Donald Trump was losing support among House Republicans, with more members publicly signaling that they would back the release. In response, Trump took to social media with a lengthy post framing the situation as though this move aligned with his stance all along. He wrote that he had already encouraged House Republicans on Friday night aboard Air Force One to release the files, insisted that there was nothing to hide, and called the attention around the documents a Democrat hoax designed to distract from what he describes as recent Republican successes. Trump's statement emphasized several themes he often revisits, arguing that the Department of Justice has already released tens of thousands of pages about Epstein, pointing to well-known Democratic figures such as Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, and others, and asserting that the House Oversight Committee can access whatever it is legally entitled to. He insisted that Republicans should refocus on issues like the economy and affordability, which he says his administration is handling effectively. He listed reduced inflation, stronger borders, lower prices, tax cuts, military rebuilds, and various social policies as examples of victories. He also claimed that no one cared about Epstein while he was alive and suggested Democrats would have used anything damaging earlier if such evidence existed. However, Trump's framing that this was his idea all along conflicts with his own previous comments. While he now says he encouraged the release on Air Force One, the actual conversation that night was different. When asked directly about releasing the files, Trump shifted the focus toward looking into Epstein's associates, naming Clinton, Hoffman, and others while describing the situation as a Democrat hoax. At one point, he even said he didn't care whether the files were released, only to follow that comment with criticism of Republicans who support disclosure, calling them weak and ineffective. He never explicitly supported the release, and in fact, he reportedly pressured members like Lauren Boebert to withdraw their names from the discharge petition. For months, he has been the central force resisting full disclosure, so the claim that this was his plan appears inconsistent. Now that many House Republicans have publicly committed to voting for release, Trump appears to be shifting his message. Members who previously refrained from taking a position began announcing support, with several explaining that transparency has always been consistent with their stated principles. Others argued that doing anything less would be interpreted as protecting people associated with Epstein. One Republican warned colleagues that Trump might offer political cover in the short term, but would not be in office forever, and that refusing transparency now would backfire later. Even GOP members who have been staunch Trump supporters emphasized that families of victims deserve answers and that the political pressure to block the files is increasingly difficult to justify. This shift suggests that Trump sees the vote as essentially decided and is moving to portray himself as aligned with the outcome rather than opposed to it. It's also worth mentioning that if Trump truly wanted these documents released, he could release them at any time, since the Department of Justice is part of his administration. The fact that the files have not already been made public raises questions about why he now portrays himself as an advocate for transparency. There may also be strategic reasons behind Trump's apparent acceptance of the release. Just days ago, he instructed Attorney General Pam Bondi to begin investigations into several high-profile individuals in connection with Epstein. If sensitive documents fall under the scope of those investigations, the administration could claim that releasing them would interfere with ongoing legal work, providing a legal justification to withhold certain parts while presenting the rest as transparency. Additionally, previous on-camera remarks from a DOJ official suggested that Republican names in the files could be heavily redacted while leaving Democratic names visible. While unverified, the claim highlights concerns that the release might not be complete or politically neutral. Still, some lawmakers believe there are ways to verify what is authentic. Attorneys for Epstein's victims have already seen many of the documents, and parts of the collection also exist within the Epstein estate, providing independent sources for comparison. This means any selective editing or withholding could be challenged, making it harder for any administration to manipulate the material without risk of exposure. Trump also mentioned in his post that he wants to return to focusing on affordability. But critics argue that during his time in office, several policy choices had the opposite effect. The trade war raised the cost of many basic goods. Healthcare subsidies were reduced, food assistance programs were trimmed, and changes to Medicaid affected millions. Rising energy prices and consistent inflation have made conditions more difficult for many families. While Trump campaigned on lowering costs, many of the actions taken under his administration have been viewed as contributing to higher expenses rather than easing them. At the same time, Trump's focus since returning to office has largely centered on personal projects and luxury upgrades, from major renovations at government properties to high-cost travel accommodations and lavish events. These priorities contrast sharply with promises to focus on everyday affordability, and this disconnect hasn't gone unnoticed. Even some supporters within his own party have begun acknowledging that the messaging around affordability no longer matches the outcomes people are experiencing. The combination of shifting explanations, inconsistent positions, and growing pressure from within his party has placed Trump in a difficult position. His attempt to reframe the release of the Epstein files as something he supported from the beginning reflects how quickly the political landscape around this issue has shifted. Many Americans across the political spectrum, regardless of ideology, are demanding clarity about the Epstein documents. The more Trump changes his stance, the more it feeds the perception that the story is getting away from him. As Republicans, Democrats, and the public continue watching this unfold, the next steps, especially the results of Tuesday's vote and the form in which any documents are released, will shape how this narrative develops. Whether the files come out fully, selectively, or in phases, the scrutiny of how transparent the process truly is will remain intense. And as political tensions rise, both supporters and critics are paying close attention to the choices being made at each step.